I've been wanting to do this video for a while, because most of the videos I've done more recently have talked about current discourse, and not so much stuff that's already happened or fizzled out by now. I think the last time I talked about old dirty laundry, no pun intended, was when I talked about Hetalia, and fittingly enough, this happened at around the same time. So that's why I attribute 2016 with being a big year for this kind of stuff. Teenage girls back then were heinous people, and that's not to say that they aren't now, just for different reasons. I am not making a Hello Kitty girl video. All of that being said, one piece of media subject to the abhorrence of 2016 fandoms was Voltron, Legendary Defender.
Where are we?
You five were brought here for a reason. Together, you will form Voltron. The greatest weapon ever known. Protector of the innocent. And our only hope to save the universe.
Jeez, no pressure.
Before we talk about Legendary Defender, it's important that I first tell you that this show is one of many in the Voltron franchise, and as of 2023, is its latest incarnation. The series has very many influences and incarnations between its Japanese series and what was adapted for an American audience, so I will try to make this background as clear as I can. The initial 80s adaptation of Voltron was created using the Japanese television series Beast King Go Lion, which was trimmed up, dubbed over, and somewhat rewritten to do so. The series is a sci-fi action show with a mecha element to it in the form of the titular mech Voltron. The show revolves around the legend of Voltron, saying that it is storied to be the robotic defender of good and the slayer of all evil, protecting both Earth and the galaxy's many planets and peoples. The series concerns a new evil with even more power than seen before, with the galaxy calling on Voltron once again to protect it, as well as a new group of people to pilot the robot lions that make up Voltron. Akira Kogane, Isamu Kurogane, Hiroshi Shorty Suzuishi, Tsuyoshi Seido, and Takashi Shirogane. If you're not big into mecha stuff, you might have seen a little bit of a Power Rangers series where a similar thing happens. They each have a mech they pilot that can join with the other ones to make a big scary one. The particular planet Eris, ruled over by Princess Farla assisted by her right-hand rival, is a target of an evil warlord, Emperor Daibazal, his counterpart the Witch Minerva, and later in the series, the Prince Imperial Syncline. One big change made to Beast King Go Lion was that the main characters of the series were renamed from their Japanese names to names more American and easier to pronounce. This has been done with many anime. One that particularly comes to mind is Digimon, where almost every character was renamed to a westernized version of their Japanese names. For example, the character Joe, who is my favorite, and I will not be defending myself for always using my favorite characters as examples, was renamed this from his Japanese name Gio. Of the 8 main characters in Digimon, 5 of them were given nicknames or westernized names, and the same kind of thing goes for Voltron, and applies to the Lion's pilots, their allies, the planets, and the enemies. Akira was renamed to Keith Cogain, Takashi was renamed to Sven Holgersson, Hiroshi was renamed to Daryl Stoker, called mostly by his new nickname Pidge, Isamu was renamed to Lance McLean, and Tsuyoshi was renamed to Tsuyoshi Garrett, but mainly referred to by his nickname Hunk. The planet of Eris's princess, Farla, was renamed to Allura. Her partner Ribal was renamed to Karan. The evil Emperor Daibazal was renamed Zarkon, his mage Minerva was renamed to Hagar, and his son Syncline was renamed to Lotor. All of that will be crucial later, which is why I decided to just get it out of the way now. Another quite serious difference in 1984 Voltron was that the crew responsible had no viable way to translate the Japanese voice lines to English, so this meant that the show had to basically be rewritten around what was happening in the pre-recorded show. On top of that, a lot of scenes were cut or removed, including some of the more graphic ones. Scenes where notable side characters get hurt or die, and even ones where main characters get hurt or die, were completely edited out and written around, using already shown shots of said characters after what would have been their death or original fate in the Japanese cut. Many of the show's plotlines of torture and combat were rewritten or otherwise recontextualized if not removed. Arguably, this made the show closer to the more palatable Sunday cartoon format it was aiming for in its westernization. 1984 Voltron has 124 episodes split across 3 seasons, but for some reason seasons 1 and 3 share the name Lion Force Voltron, while Season 2 is named Vehicle Team Voltron. I think this is probably because whatever focus was going on in 1984 Voltron changed somewhat between seasons, and jumped between casts of characters. This would culminate in a TV special 2 years later, Fleet of Doom, where they would all finally take down Dibazol. The Voltron series would stay somewhat quiet until 1998, when it would get a CGI animated series, Voltron the Third Dimension. Saying that the show went against the original look of the characters is definitely an understatement. Like, I don't even want to show this to anyone. The series would follow the original cast of characters, both good and evil, with the main focus enemy being the Prince Syncline. There are a few notable things about this series, one being that this is the first Voltron series to completely ignore some of the events that happened in the original season it takes place after Lion Force Voltron, completely altering the canon for the first time in the show. In 2011, another installment was added to the franchise, and was animated in 2D thankfully, but was animated in that 2010s American cartoon way. This series is set further in the future, where Lotor is now king. And there are also additions to the cast, new characters that the original ones are kind of mentors to in a way. All of these shows become important later on to Legendary Defender, some in major ways in terms of influence, and some in more minor ways.
We'll show them something they'll never forget.
I am going to preface this by saying I watched all of Legendary Defender except for the last season because it has 8 of them, and by about the 5th, I didn't much like the direction it was going in, and instead of literally threatening crew members, which I'll touch on again later, I simply stopped watching because it was that easy. Different from the other entries to the Voltron franchise, Voltron Legendary Defender could not be enjoyed by just any cable TV enjoyer's eyes, no. This series' first drawback is the fact that it's behind a paywall. It's a Netflix original, and I don't recommend getting Netflix just for this show, or any other Netflix original for that matter. I'm getting really excited just dancing around the edge of the show, so let's just go ahead and start. I will try my best not to spoil anything too much, just mostly what's in the first season, because really, that single one is used in its entirety to set up the rest of the series. In 2016, DreamWorks announced that they would be the animation studio behind a reboot of Voltron, and the upcoming series was given a very promising outlook, with Avatar: The Last Airbender crew members Lauren Montgomery and Joaquim Dos Santos serving as showrunners. At WonderCon in March of that same year, the voice cast would be announced, and later on in June, Pride Month, the first season of the show would air on Netflix. 4 young members of a space academy, Lance, who is somewhat cocky and overly confident of himself, Pidge, a genius in technology, Hunk, a gentle man with a big heart, and Keith, a brooding and mysterious yet talented student, get wrapped up in a plot to rescue Shiro, a member of an expedition to another planet that had gone wrong, after he's hidden away by what serves as Earth's space government. After the kiddos find him, they escape to the desert and slowly learn of what Shiro saw while he was out on his expedition, as well as what he learned about what lies beyond Earth. They figure out that a race of aliens named the Galra are in search of a mega weapon called Voltron, part of which is located on Earth. They all then decide that the best option is to seek Voltron out themselves, first finding a blue robotic lion mech buried in the desert. They find that this mech requires a pilot to operate it, and with the Academy kids all training to be pilots, it made sense that one of them would be such. It accepts Lance as its pilot, as the lion must form somewhat of a bond with whoever would serve as said pilot. The lion takes the 5 off of Earth to a planet Eris, where they meet the Princess Allura, a friendly woman with an air of generosity about her, and her advisor, the more prompt and focused Karan. The two, upon the awakening of the Blue Lion, had woken up from their own cryogenic sleep, and their awakening further triggered the Galran witch Hagar to sense their consciousness in the universe and further informed the Emperor Zarkon of the event. He sends troops to Eris in the hopes to destroy both Allura and Karan, as well as any hope for Voltron to land in the right hands. Allura declares the kids to be paladins, soldiers of her kind and the protectors of Voltron. They learn that Voltron has 4 more lions that make it up, and with the looming threat of literal death ships being sent by the Galra to destroy everyone, it's decided that the next best move is to locate the rest. Lance and Hunk help locate the yellow lion, with Shiro and Pidge setting out to find the green one. The red lion is somehow in the possession of the Galra on one of their ships. Later on, Keith joins Shiro and Pidge as they help to infiltrate the ship, with the help of the recovered green lion. They eventually free the red lion, and once they return to Allura with 4 of the lions, the 5th black lion is released from Allura's castle. With Lance at the helm of the blue lion, Keith piloting the red, Hunk in the yellow lion, Pidge in the green, and Shiro serving as their leader in the black lion, The pieces of Voltron are now united under one front, and combine to form the mech soldier himself, Voltron. And the 5 destroy the attacking Galran ships, and thus become the defenders of the universe. The first season basically has 3 major plot points. One being that the team must learn to balance the relationship both between each individual and their lions, and also between each other to form Voltron reliably and work together as one. The second being that the team would need to track and adapt to the Galra's plans and successfully defend against them. And the third being that Pidge's father and brother were lost in the same expedition that Shiro had survived. He hopes that maybe since Shiro was able to survive, so did his relatives. Whatever isn't crucial to any of the 3 plots is usually just a little romp through space and a general exploration of the universe that Legendary Defender is set in, with the climax of the season of course being at the end, being a cliffhanger, so that you keep that Netflix subscription and watch for the next season, which would air in January of 2017. It picks up where the first left off, with the team exploring some more locations, getting into other adventures. Honestly, this one is slightly more laid back while still having one central focus. It's probably my favorite season because it has the mall episode. This season also throws in another subplot, Keith's background, as he's an orphan and knows basically nothing about who he is biologically or what people he really comes from. Season 3 released in August of 2017 and is the lion switching season, which immediately made me roll my eyes because it was already established that each lion had specific bonds to each pilot. Why try to rewrite that now? The pilots of Voltron end up switching their lions around to some degree, and arguably, this is done to accommodate storylines later on so a certain character can explore their own kind of separate storyline. In this season, Lotor becomes a more prominent character, and a lot of the big reveals and power shifts in this season follow into Season 4, which would air in October of 2017. Season 4 is functionally the most filler-filled, but it does make some big points and actually gets closer to wrapping up one of the plots introduced in the first season. Season 5 would air in March of 2018 and begin to head into the endgame of the series, with the threats becoming bigger, everything being tied together in some way, betrayal and broken trust afoot, big backstory reveals, and everything in between. This can pretty much be said about the next few seasons. Season 6 aired in June of 2018, and Season 7 aired in August of 2018. There's a little bit of a time skip between Seasons 7 and 8, with 6 months having passed. The season features the final showdowns between the Galra and the Voltron team, but also introduces new characters who become kind of minorly important to wrapping up the plot. I genuinely didn't know what happened in this season, other than what I'd heard about it when it first dropped, but this made me want to cry. Legendary Defender saw amazing ratings through its run, which is partly why it was able to go on so long. The show's plot and writing was highly praised by critics and most fans alike. It wasn't of any doubt, really, because the crew's past writing on The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra had been stellar. The series was held to high regards for both being a faithful retelling of the original series, while breathing new life into it that made it unique and fun. I personally enjoyed it a lot, like I said. I started to lose interest as I do with shows that run for more than 3 seasons, but regardless, it and its lovable characters kept me captivated for a long time. Just before we get too serious, let's just establish that these are my favorite characters, and if yours or any other ones, you're wrong. For legal reasons, that's a joke. Voltron's success was watched by many, and by many I mean hundreds of thousands of people well above the show's minimum age rating of 7. 2016 internet comes in clutch again. As you may know, either from context, my Hetalia video, or personal experience for which you should get financial compensation, the online fandom universe in 2016 was a genuine cesspool consisting of primarily the worst fans that each piece of media could concoct. Every piece of media has its bad fans versus its good fans, and Voltron's is notorious for being more bad than good. And as someone who survived the Voltron fandom, can I get that on a hat? I just realized I gotta get that on a t-shirt or a hat or something, please. Okay, well, as someone who survived the Voltron fandom, I can confirm from the inside that this is definitely true. I have never seen a wiki for anything in my life that had a whole separate category for, quote, fan behavior. I don't necessarily want to start with the bad, but I think it's always better to get the bad out of the way, so I have something good to share before I vanish until the next week. So here's your fair warning that if you're uncomfortable with discussions of pro-shipping, I will leave a timestamp to skip to. I will try to make it quick, as there is only one popular example of pro-shipping in the fandom. So, The members of Voltron's team are all pretty much the same age, with Lance and Hunk being 17 at the beginning of the series, Pidge being 15, Keith being 17 or maybe 18, and Shiro being 26, and of course Allura and Karan not having any distinguishable age, though Allura appears to be in her late teens or early 20s, with Karan appearing to be in maybe his late 30s or early 40s. The relationship that Keith and Shiro have with each other is what we'll be focusing on here. They are very brotherly to one another, with Keith looking up to Shiro for his guidance and experience. The relationship they have, while not a biological one, is hinted to be rooted in much more of a personal standpoint than the relationships between Shiro and any of the other paladins. Of course, this led some people to start pairing them together, and this became a big source of disagreement between people in the fandom. As far as it's known, a lot of the ages in Voltron were confirmed by outside sources, rather than explicitly stated in the actual show in words. Maybe some were shown on screen rather than said, I'm not sure. But given that the 4 paladins other than Shiro were all students at the beginning of the series, it's safer to assume they're all minors or like close to being minors, and whatever time skips and stuff like that happen, thus bring their ages up by a little. Keith and Shiro is better to be seen as a pro ship just to be safe, because even if Keith isn't a minor for the entire series, he's physically seen as one for the majority of it, or from the beginning of it, and the age disparity between the two is a little bit staggering, no offense. Besides that, like I said, their relationship comes across as more of an intimate brotherhood than it does a romantic relationship. The popular opinion thrown around back before pro shipping was called what it is now, or seen the way that it is now, was that it's better to just respect people's ships, no matter how weird they may seem. That opinion is unfortunately exactly what has enabled pro shippers to exist, and it somewhat fittingly has its main roots in the 2016 Fandom Space opinion on shipping.
It's right, then left. You're off.
Lance, are you okay? We did it. We are a good team.
I say Vol, and you say Tron. Vol?
Voltron?
No. The cheer includes the instructions. I say Vol, and you say...
Voltron?
We'll work on it.
Hey, Lance! I got your lion back.
Thank you, Keith. Now can you come and unchain me?
What's that? You're cutting out. I can't hear you. The amount of information in your brain could be stored in a paper airplane.
Oh yeah? Well, the amount of information you have, Keith, could be...
Yeah?
It's less than what I have.
Oh, good one, Lance. We had a bonding moment. I cradled you in my arms.
Nope, don't remember. Didn't happen.
I wanted to dedicate a whole section of this video to Clance, the popular relationship between Keith and Lance. Even if you were never a Voltron fan, you've probably seen these two together, hopefully clothed. If not, I'm very, very sorry. A common occurrence across many pieces of media is the blue and red pairing, a pairing between two characters, one with a blue clothing color or aesthetic, and one with a red clothing color or aesthetic, that have roughly this personality model. Red is the more standoffish and what we'll call emo one, and blue is the more joking one or laid-back one. Red is more brash, while blue can be more level-headed. Blue often has more interchangeable parts than a red character. For example, Jesse and James from Pokemon, or Tord and Tom from Eddsworld. Reki and Longa from Skate the Infinity. Ruby and Sapphire from Steven Universe. Each of these pairings has their own different takes and nuances on the red and blue pairing trope. It's often referred to as red Oni, blue Oni, and has many, many more examples than what I gave. Anyway, the ship between Keith and Lance is unanimously the most popular one in the fandom, and has over 14,000 entries on Archive of Our Own, a popular fanfiction site, thousands more than any of the other pairings I mentioned, just for comparison. The dialogue and relationship between the two was sort of a friendly rivalry, which made it even more tantalizing to fans. The suggestion that these two could have some kind of somewhat enemies to lovers situation. It looked for a very long time in the series like they would end up together, with their relationship only strengthening with each season. Sort of touching on the absence makes the heart grow fonder idea, when Keith would disappear on his own personal missions for a while. Many fans believed in their heart of hearts that they would be endgame, which would have been the more satisfying slow burn writing that made Castradora so appeasing to She-Ra fans. So in the 7th season of the show, when this was being made to look like it wasn't gonna happen after all, fans that were so intensely dedicated to the relationship that they would do anything to correct this course issued death threats to both the cast and crew of the show. I am in no way supporting this decision of anyone. It is an awful thing to do to anybody for any reason, let alone over the relationship between two completely fictitious people. It's just one of the most notorious facts about the Voltron fandom and needs mentioning. Among the victims of these threats were the showrunners, and even Pidge and Shiro's voice actors, who had nothing to do with the show's writing in the slightest, so I'm not sure what outcome was desired from that. At the beginning of the final season, it's written that Lance begins a relationship with Allura, after having flirted with her and mentioned being in love with her or having feelings for her multiple times throughout the series. This did feel like it was somewhat rushed, but an understandable and reasonable ending to what was a series-long pining like Aang and Katara. After the 8th season's premiere, with no Clance, fans were very upset, and even after the show had been released and out there in the open, finished, done with, showrunners were blackmailed into rewriting the show's final season so it worked out to fans' expectations, Clance intact. This didn't end up causing any such rewrite, and the 7th and 8th seasons left fans very bitter, some for incredibly stupid reasons, and some for very reasonable and understandable reasons, which I will get into.
Why did you wait for the countdown? Did you want to see men kissing? You like men! You like kissing! You like men kissing!
Voltron's writing has a lot of good and a lot of bad. No matter how good the series and writing was overall, the main issues it has lie within its characters, rather than the plot, which is something I don't think we see very often. Usually it's the other way around. I will mention that there are slight spoilers in this section, well, like kind of major spoilers, so if you want to skip them, there will be a timestamp you can skip to. I'll talk about some of the merchandise and other stuff that VLD spawned after this. Starting with the good, one of Legendary Defender's main praises was the visual diversity of the cast and POC representation. Lance is Cuban, confirmed both by a line he gives about loving Varadero Beach, and by showrunners outside of the actual show. And Hunk is Samoan, shown through a comment he makes about a dish that has Samoan roots, and his love for cooking. Allura, while of an alien race, has the appearance of a black woman, and is considered such. Keith and Shiro are both seen to be of an Asian descent. However, it is worth mentioning that Keith is never stated to have Kogain as his last name in VLD, neither is it ever explicitly said that he's Asian. It's just pretty much considered a given because of his past naming in other Voltron series. Pidge is Italian, meaning all things considered, the only white character in the main cast is Karan. Sorry, Karan. All of the races and ages of the characters can be confirmed in the official Voltron guidebook, the Paladin's Handbook, save, of course, for some of the conflicting information I gave regarding Keith's age and background. While all of this representation is good for the fact that it can be observed in the main cast, that's also one of Voltron's main issues, is that the representation is mostly just that, observable by the eye. A criticism of the representation in Voltron is that none of the characters make any real connections to their backgrounds, only surface level references to them, if that. There isn't any time or care dedicated into writing episodes or scenes where any of the characters reference their own culture or are visibly seen engaging in it. The characters don't much talk about their family backgrounds, and an easy way to have done this is by mentioning what the kids are homesick for, having been in space for like, ever. Even small things like that would have been more than what was given. As for Allura specifically, she is a big point of controversy among fans. Most of the hatred towards her comes from having, quote, broken up Clance or ruined Clance. But honestly, she's one of the better characters in the show, and when compared to her past counterpart that only stood to be the damsel in distress, and a helpless princess who needed soldiers to guide her, she was completely reworked as the heart of the team, their leader, their rock, a woman with her own agency who was behind almost every decision regarding the safety of the universe. I love Allura, even if I think her relationship with Lance was lazy and predictable writing. The handling in particular of her relationship with the Galra is what brought her character down, at the fault of the writers, not of her personality. The Galra forcibly colonized her planet, killed off her race, imprisoning and enslaving some of them years prior. They were completely and utterly the bad guy, with no level of redemption to be offered for anything they did. It was completely reasonable for Allura to have something against them, and completely reasonable for her to be uncomfortable around the Galra or in discussing their actions. At some point in the season, the team forms an alliance with the Galran Prince Lotor. and Allura is written to literally apologize for her ill feelings towards the Galra in light of her newfound alliance with one, rather than the two just agreeing that whatever she felt was justified, because it should be obvious that it is. It's not like she decided to feel that way for no reason, they gave her multiple reasons to feel that way. And for it to be written that a woman of color, whose race was abused by another, apologizes for the way she feels about her oppressors is completely tone deaf. It should be noted that this is also explored and emphasized later on in the series, as more events tie the Paladins up with the Galra. Another misstep they made with her character was unfortunately killing her off at the end, which I actually didn't know they did until I wrote the script. I spent 5 years thinking that her and Lance lived happily together. I feel robbed of my happiness now. I blame this personal affront directly on the fanbase itself. As I said before, most fans disliked Allura because she ruined Clance, so it's not a surprise to me that I personally never saw anyone bring up her death or mourn her in any fashion. Not to say that nobody did, I know I am now. Women of color are often seen in media as expendable devices to help move the plot or a certain narrative along. She ends up sacrificing herself for the greater good of the redemption of the Galran race and the restoration of the balance in the universe by sacrificing herself, which is somewhat of a testament to her selfless nature, which is nice, but as a bigger picture, this is something that's done all too often with women of color. They sacrifice themselves for the good of the main characters, or for purposes highlighting the actions of main characters, or even benefiting their writing. Allura broke many tropes by being a black woman who was a love interest for one of the main characters, having more than the one role of being this stereotypically sassy character, having layers of her own personality outside her being a princess, all to be undermined in the end by the fact that she wasn't permanent and wasn't treated as such, and that her death directly benefited the image of her oppressors, who turn over a new leaf as a result and become allied with Earth and the rest of the universe. Another main praise for Voltron, although a very minor one, is that they have a few canonically LGBT characters. In an episode in the last few seasons, we're introduced to Adam, Shiro's fiancé from the years before he goes on his expedition. He's shown to have this storied background with Adam, and their relationship is pretty well defined, if only in one episode. However, Adam has an argument with Shiro over his unshakable intention to go on this dangerous expedition, and it's suggested that he breaks up with him over it. Adam, a pilot for the Space Force for Earth, or whatever it's called, ends up dying, and we hear basically nothing about him for the rest of the show. And it's at this point that Shiro is reduced to only being the part of him that's gay. Rather than him being a great soldier, having PTSD from being held captive and having seen the things he's seen, and being the leader for the Paladins. Instead being a little more one-note and remorseful of what happened in his past, specifically with Adam. This is Voltron's first brush with killing off its gays, even if it is just one of the two. Even worse, Adam is visually a person of color, which makes it no better that they decided to kill off one of their only queer men of color. At the end of the series, Shiro is shown to have married a man, a side character who gets little to no spotlight or characterization, which brings up the criticism that they just gave Shiro some random gay happy ending to make the fans happy. Other canonically LGBT characters in Legendary Defender include Zethard and Azor, two of Lotor's generals, a team of which is composed of all women, which is another nice little minor touch. Their relationship is only somewhat hinted at, which is, again, a case of the writing being a little dubious. Unfortunately, the two are killed off at some point towards the end of the series, with only a little bit of a hint that they may still be alive in the last season, perhaps as a way to please fans, or at least ease up a little of the controversies and accusations of purposefully killing queer characters that they'd come across by then. Alright, now we're gonna take a breather and end on a less upsetting note. The success of VLD spawned many opportunities for toys, comics, and video games, all of which the series would receive. 3 volumes of a comic series would release starting in 2016, with 5 issues in the first volume between July of 2016 and November of the same year, 5 issues in the second volume between October of 2017 and December of the same year, and 5 issues in the third volume between July of 2018 and November of the same year. A 4th volume was promised at the announcement of the comic series, but by the 3rd volume, it was decided that the contract with the comics publisher, Lionforge Comics, would not be renewed. Each of the comic volumes take place at specific points either during or between the show's seasons. And while this does make them canon, they were purposefully written so nothing of true importance happens, unless you're someone who analyzes that stuff on a microscopic level, as not to confuse those who only watch the show. VLD also got multiple licenses with companies to produce toys and collectibles for the show. Most notably, there was a Funko Pop release that consisted of Allura, Shiro, Keith, Lance, Hunk, and Pidge, as well as Voltron himself, but sadly no Karan. In 2016, a collectible Voltron statue was created by Sideshow. It is a model of the 80s Voltron, but this was done given the resurgence of the relevance of Voltron brought on by VLD. There's also sets of figurines put out of the Lions and the Paladins by Playmates Toys, as well as some cosmetic Voltron pieces, just as cute little costume bits, I guess. There's also a Voltron Lego Ideas set, modeled after the 80s Voltron because of the same reason as the Sideshow statue. In 2017, Voltron VR Chronicles was released as a virtual reality game based on the show that has all the characters, having you pilot the Blue Lion through the beautiful settings of the show, while solving some puzzles and getting into battles in an immersive way achieved by the actual VR. It's fully voiced and everything by the show's cast, and from what I can tell, it's a pretty well-rated game. Another game based on the show, Voltron Cubes of Volcarion, released in 2019, and it was a board game style video game, playing kind of like Tetris, where you stack up these battle blocks and try to defeat your opponent's tower of blocks in a real-time PvP match. It looks pretty fun, although it seems only vaguely Voltron themed. This was quite a long video, and I really hope that pays off. I don't ever usually ask you to do this, but if you could maybe interact with the video in some way or subscribe, it would be a huge help. A lot of work went into this video, and I'm aiming to increase the quality of my videos by as much as possible in the future. If you're a Voltron fan, let me know what you think. Give me your unpopular opinions. I want to know if you disagree with any of the decisions made by the writers or not. I wasn't serious about the favorite character thing. This is a safe space for all Voltron characters. Anyway, I hope you have an amazing day. Stay safe. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.